The station was falling apart the way old things fall apart. Not all at once, but piece by piece, like it was deciding which parts still mattered. Cassian Drift Station had 3 factions living inside it, and 2 weeks ago they had stopped talking to each other. Now whole sections were sealed behind blast doors. The power flickered every few minutes. The air smelled like burning metal and something older, something that had no name but made your stomach tight. Sergeant Marin Voss dropped in through the maintenance shaft alone. She preferred alone. She had asked for alone, 8 months running, and Command had finally stopped arguing with her about it. Give Voss the solo jobs. She comes back. That was the deal. She hit the floor of the lower corridor and stayed low. Her boots made no sound on the grated metal. She ran a quick check. Rifle, sidearm, medkit, extraction line. Everything where it should be. She moved. The job was simple. Find a logistics officer named Darren Cole, who had been stranded when Section 4 sealed. Get him out. 40 minutes, maybe less if the station kept shaking itself apart ahead of schedule. She found Section 4 in 11 minutes. She found Cole in 14. He was already dead. Had been for a while. A ceiling beam had come down clean across the corridor, and Cole had been standing in exactly the wrong place when it fell. There was nothing to be done about it. Marin crouched beside him for a moment, checked his tags, stood back up. She radioed in. Logistics officer is KIA, returning to extraction point. Copy, Voss. Time to spare. Come on home. She turned to go. That was when she heard it. It was not a sound exactly. It was more like a pressure, a low hum in the air that she felt in her back teeth rather than her ears. She stood very still, the way she always stood when something was wrong. But she didn't know what yet. She followed it. 2 corridors over, past a section of wall that had buckled inward, past a water pipe spraying cold mist across the floor. She found the source. A Keth. The alien woman was pinned under a structural beam that had come down at an angle, trapping her lower 4 limbs against the floor. She was alive. She was conscious. Her eyes, 3 of them, set wide across a broad, flat face, were open and watching the door as if she had heard Marin coming from far away. The bioluminescent ridges along her spine and shoulders, the ones that Keth used the way humans used facial expressions, were cycling through a color Marin had never seen before. Pale. Almost white. Like old ash, or the sky just before snow. The alien woman did not call out, did not reach for her, did not make any sound at all. She was simply waiting. Marin stood in the doorway and looked at her. The station groaned somewhere above them. Dust fell from the ceiling in a slow curtain. The alien woman looked back, patient, completely still, like someone who had finished being afraid and was now just finishing. Marin's radio crackled. Voss, you copy? You en route? She looked at the beam. She looked at the alien woman's legs trapped beneath it. She ran a fast calculation, the kind she did without thinking, like breathing. Weight, angle, her own strength, time remaining, how bad the shaking was getting. The math was not impossible. It was close to impossible. There was a difference. Copy, she said into the radio. Just doing a secondary sweep. Give me a few minutes. She crossed the room and put her hands on the beam. The alien woman's ridges shifted. The ash-white flittered. Something else moved through the color. A pale gold, confused and unsteady, like a candle in wind. She was trying to understand what was happening. Marin was not going to explain it. The beam weighed a lot, more than she could lift straight up. She knew that before she tried, so she didn't try. She found the angle instead, the place where the beam rested against a broken section of floor paneling, where the geometry gave her something to work with. She put her shoulder under the low end, and pushed up and sideways at the same time. It moved, barely, half an inch. The alien woman made a sound, not the low hum from before, but something sharper, pained, and pulled her lower limbs in toward her body. 2 of the 4 came free. Marin repositioned, pushed again. Her left hand slipped and caught the edge of the beam wrong. She felt 2 fingers bend in a direction fingers didn't go. She breathed out through her nose, hard, and kept pushing. The beam shifted another inch. "Okay," Marin said. "Pull." The alien woman pulled. She moved like someone who understood instructions even in a language they hadn't learned yet. She understood the word pull from the way Marin's whole body was saying it. The last two limbs came free. Marin let the beam down slow and stepped back. She looked at the alien woman's legs. Lower limbs, 6 total, 2 still clearly hurt but not broken. She could move. She would have to. The station shuddered. Hard this time. Somewhere not far away, something structural gave way with a sound like a gunshot. "We have to go," Marin said. The alien woman looked at her. Those 3 black eyes moved across Marin's face as if reading something in a language that didn't have an alphabet yet. Her ridges shifted again. The confused gold deepened. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was something else. A question so large the color couldn't hold its shape. Marin did not wait for the question. She moved to the door, checked the corridor, and looked back. "Come on." The alien woman rose, unsteady on the hurt legs, but upright. She was tall, taller than Marin by almost half a meter, and moved with a careful deliberateness, like someone recalibrating balance in real time. They went down the corridor together, Marin in front, rifle up, watching the ceiling as much as the path ahead. The alien woman behind, silent, keeping pace. The radio crackled. "Voss, we're seeing some structural movement in your quadrant. Recommend you accelerate." "Working on it," Marin said. They moved through the mist from the broken pipe. Marin grabbed a wall when the floor rocked, and reached back without thinking. A hand back, an offer of something to hold. The alien woman took it. Just for a moment, just until the rocking stopped. Her hand was warm. The fingers were the wrong number and the wrong shape, but the grip was the same. The same as anyone who did not want to fall. They reached the drop shaft with 11 seconds to spare. Marin pulled the shaft door open and pushed the alien woman in first. The alien woman went. Then she looked back at Marin through the narrow gap. Those 3 wide eyes, her ridges burning now with a silver white that had no ash in it at all. Alive. Surprised to be alive. Surprised that someone had decided that mattered. Marin stepped in behind her. The shaft sealed. The section they had just left folded in on itself like a closing hand. On the way up, neither of them said anything. Marin kept her eyes on the shaft wall and thought about nothing. She was good at trying. The alien woman kept her eyes on Marin. She was trying to solve a problem she had never been given a formula for. She had no idea yet that it would take her 4 years. The extraction shuttle was small and cold, and smelled like recycled air and machine oil. It had 4 seats. Marin and the alien woman sat across from each other with the whole empty space between them, which was not much space, but felt like it. Marin had wrapped her 2 broken fingers with medical tape she kept in her left chest pocket. She had done it one-handed, efficiently, without making any face about it. The alien woman had watched the whole process and said nothing. She was always watching. Marin had noticed that in the station, and she noticed it again now. The alien woman's 3 black eyes moved across things with a slow, careful attention, like she was taking notes on everything she saw and filing it somewhere she could find it later. Her name was Thessaly Vekoron. Marin knew that from the identification panel on the room where she had found her. Keth Intercessor, which meant something like diplomat, something like scientist, and something like judge, all mixed together. A high caste, an important person. Marin had not known that when she moved the beam. She had known the beam was heavy, and the woman was pinned, and the station was coming apart. That had been the whole of the calculation. Thessaly's bioluminescent ridges had gone quiet since they boarded. A neutral pale blue, the color of someone thinking hard about something and not letting it show. But now, as the shuttle cleared the station and the docking clamps released with a clunk, the color shifted. A deep, slow amber. The color of amber in sunlight, concentrated, still. She was analyzing. "You are injured," Thessaly said. Her voice was lower than Marin expected, and each word came out shaped carefully, like she was cutting them clean at both ends. Her galactic standard was precise, better than most humans Marin knew. 2 fingers, Marin said. Taped. Fine. You injured them on the beam. Yes. You did not stop. No. Thessaly was quiet for a moment. The amber in her ridges deepened by 1 shade. I am cataloging the sequence of events, she said, from the point of your entry to the point of our current location. I want to understand it correctly. Okay, Marin said. You were sent to recover a human officer. Yes, the human officer was dead. Yes, your mission was therefore complete by the terms under which you were deployed. Marin did not say anything. You deviated from those terms to recover me, Thessaly said. I am not human. I am not a contracted ally of your organization. There is no treaty obligation that applied. There was no command instruction. That's correct. Then I am trying to understand, Thessaly said, with the tone of someone who genuinely, methodically could not make the numbers add up. What the operative logic was. Marin looked out the small porthole window at the stars. They were the same stars they always were. She had never found them particularly comforting, but they were at least predictable. You were going to die, she said. Yes. I could stop that. Yes. So I did. Thessaly's ridges went a color Marin had no name for. It was not exactly gold, and not exactly silver, and it pulsed once, like a heartbeat, before settling back to amber. That is not a complete logical framework, Thessaly said. That is a description of events. I know. Do you have a framework? Marin turned from the window. She looked at Thessaly directly. In the way she looked at things, she was deciding whether to answer honestly or not. She decided. No, she said. Thessaly was quiet for a long time after that. The compact processing bay was a wide, clean room, full of the kind of light that came from panels in the ceiling, and made everything look slightly less real than it was. There were officers. There were medical personnel. There was a Veth mediator in a gray sash, who looked at Marin the way someone looks at a math problem that has come up with the wrong answer. The medical team went to Thessaly first, which was correct. Her injuries were worse. They scanned her lower limbs with small humming devices and spoke to her in murmurs. Marin sat on a bench against the wall and waited. A human officer came to her first. Young, very clean uniform. He had the face of someone who had been told to be careful about how he opened this conversation. Sergeant Voss. Sir, you want to walk me through the deviation? I found the logistics officer deceased. I found a Keth intercessor pinned in the adjacent section. I extracted her. The Keth was not part of your mission parameters. No, sir. He wrote something on his pad. And your reasoning? Marin looked at him. She was going to die. He waited. She did not add anything to that. He wrote something else, something longer this time. She watched his pen move and thought about what word could possibly take that many characters to record. From across the room, Thessaly watched the exchange. Her medical scan was done. She sat very still on the examination table, with her ridges cycling through their quiet amber. And she watched Marin answer questions in the flat, short way Marin answered things, stripping every sentence down to just the load-bearing part and dropping the rest. A Keth intercessor was trained to observe communication, to read what was underneath words and between them. Thessaly had been doing this for 17 years, across 6 different species. She had never encountered anything quite like this. Most species, when they did something extraordinary, dressed it in language. They had words for it: honor, duty, destiny, the will of their bloodline, the law of their god. They explained it. They gave it a category. This human had no category. She had moved a 400-kilogram beam with 2 broken fingers because the woman underneath it was going to die, and she could stop that. The whole of the logic, start to finish. Thessaly turned it over in her mind, like a stone she had found on the ground, in an unexpected color. Smooth on one side, sharp on the other. The young officer with the clean uniform went away. An older one came. The questions were the same. Marin's answers were the same. At one point, the Veth mediator crossed the room and stood before her with the expression of a man holding something distasteful. "Sergeant Voss," he said, "you understand that what you did creates a political implication. I understand that's what some people will make of it. The Keth-human diplomatic relationship is not currently—" "She was going to die," Marin said. Not loud, not hard, just placed there on the table between them like a fact that did not need any company. The Veth mediator looked at her for a long moment. His face did the thing faces do when the argument they came in with has run out of ground to stand on. He wrote something on his own pad and walked away. Marin leaned her head back against the wall and looked at the ceiling panels. Thessaly watched her from across the room. The amber in her ridges shifted, warmer now, deeper. A color that had a word in Keth. A word that meant, "I have found the edge of my map, and I am looking at what is beyond it." She did not say anything. She just kept looking. Some things needed more than one sitting to properly understand. The tribunal room was white and rectangular, with a long table at the front and a gallery of seats along the left wall. It was the kind of room designed to make whoever was sitting in the single chair in the middle of it feel very alone. Marin sat in the single chair like it was a park bench. There were 4 officers behind the long table. A Veth mediator in a gray sash, different one than the processing bay, but the same face, roughly, the same careful contempt in the eyes. And in the gallery, seated apart from the handful of observers, Thessaly Vekorun. Thessaly sat with her hands folded in her lap. Her ridges were pale amber. Still, the color of extreme attention, held very quietly. She had not been asked to be here. She had asked to be here herself. The compact had agreed, probably because refusing a senior Keth intercessor entry to a proceeding about her own rescue was a diplomatic problem they did not want. The questioning began. The first officer was methodical. He walked through the mission timeline, point by point, the way someone builds a case by stacking small bricks until the weight becomes obvious. Marin answered everything. Yes, correct. Approximately, yes. At what point did you make the decision to deviate? He asked. When I found her, Marin said. Immediately? Yes. You didn't consider your mission parameters? I considered them. He made a note, and you proceeded anyway. Yes, the second officer leaned forward. He was older, with the face of someone who had been irritated for a long time and had run out of ways to express it freshly. Sergeant Voss, you were a decorated soldier before the Kepler Station incident. Your record— My record is my record, Marin said. A pause. I'm trying to give context. I know what you're doing, Marin said. Not hard, not rude. Just true. In the gallery, Thessaly's ridges pulsed once, a single beat of gold in the amber. She had spent the past 72 hours constructing a file on Marin Voss from every available source: military records, mission logs, after-action reports, the parts that were public and the parts that required the kind of access a senior Keth intercessor could request and usually receive without being told no. She knew about Kepler Station. She knew the shape of it, a defensive position that had folded fast, casualties high, one survivor. She knew the official language used to describe what Marin had done: tactical retreat under overwhelming force, survivor instinct, standard response to unwinnable engagement. She knew what that language was covering. Marin had run. Not because she was a coward. Because running was the only calculation that produced a living human at the end of it. And she had been alone, and the odds had been what they were. She had survived. And then she had spent 8 months requesting solo operations, with no team, no partners, no one else's life as a variable in her calculations. Thessaly had turned that piece of information over for 3 days. She understood now what she had not been able to compute in the station, in the shuttle, in the processing bay. Marin had not saved her because the math worked. She had saved her because the last time the math said run, she had run, and she had been running the balance of that debt ever since, one stranger at a time. The third officer was asking about protocol. Marin was answering about protocol. Thessaly was barely listening to the surface of it anymore. The Veth mediator stood. He had a prepared statement. He read it with the care of someone who had spent a long time on the wording. The concern before this tribunal is not simply the deviation from mission parameters, he said. If a human soldier is sanctioned, or unsanctioned, for this action, a signal is sent across the compact. Every soldier, every operative, every contracted individual operating in mixed-species theaters will feel that they have license to deviate from assigned objectives, based on personal judgment regarding who deserves rescue. The operational chaos that creates. She was going to die, Marin said. The mediator stopped. I heard your statement, he said, carefully. Then you heard my answer. Sergeant Voss, I don't think you understand the implications. I understand that a woman was pinned under a beam in a collapsing station, Marin said. I understand that I was standing there and I could move the beam. That's the implication I was working with. The room was quiet. Not the polite quiet of a room waiting for someone to finish. The other kind. The kind that happens when something very simple has been said and the complicated machinery around it doesn't know what to do with it. The Veth mediator looked at her for a long moment. This tribunal will take a recess, he said. People stood, moved toward the doors. The hum of voices began. Thessaly did not move. She sat in her gallery seat with her hands still folded, and watched Marin, who also had not moved, who was sitting in the single chair, in the middle of the white room with her eyes on the middle distance, and her jaw very slightly tight. It was the only thing that showed, the jaw. Everything else was composed, flat, still. But that jaw, that was the place where whatever was happening underneath had found the smallest possible exit. Thessaly thought about Kepler Station. She thought about what it costs to carry something like that, not in your memory, but in your muscles, in the place where decisions live before they become decisions. The place that had said go when a beam needed lifting. Not because the math said go. Because the math had said run once before, and she had listened, and it had not been enough. Thessaly stood. She crossed the room. She sat down in the chair beside Marin. Not the tribunal chair, just a plain chair she pulled over from the gallery row. And she sat in it, and she did not say anything for a moment. Marin looked at her sideways. You don't have to stay, Marin said. I know, Thessaly said. Another moment. They will likely discipline you, Thessaly said. Probably. A demotion, reassignment. That's usually how it goes. Thessaly was quiet. Her ridges cycled through 3 colors in quick succession. Amber, deep gold, then something Marin had no name for. A color that lived between silver and blue and moved like water in low gravity. I want you to understand something, Thessaly said. My people have a concept, kin-bound logic. It is very old. It is the foundation of every survival decision we have made as a species for 6,000 years. You protect your bloodline, your species, your contracted allies, in that order. Anything outside that order is statistically, biologically, culturally, irrational. Marin said nothing. What you did, Thessaly said, does not have a category in any framework I was taught. I have been trying to build one for 3 days. I cannot build one. Every time I find a structure that fits, I test it, and it breaks. She looked at Marin directly. I think, Thessaly said, that you do not fit in a structure. I think you are something my language was not built to name. Marin looked at her for a long time, just slightly. That's a lot of words, she said, for a broken beam and 2 bad fingers. Thessaly's ridges pulsed, gold, sharp, like a struck match. It was the first time Marin had seen that color on her. She did not know yet that in Teth, that color meant laughter. The mediator's voice came from the doorway. Recess over. Time to go back in. Marin stood, rolled her shoulders once, picked up the chair she'd been sitting in and set it back exactly where it came from. She walked back to the single chair in the middle of the room. She sat down. The compact gave it a name 6 weeks after the tribunal. Voss syndrome. The official documentation described it as a psychological anomaly observed in certain human military personnel. A failure of kin bond prioritization, resulting in unsolicited cross-species preservation behavior at personal cost. It was filed in the Galactic Compact's Medical and Behavioral Index between a VETH respiratory condition and a rare Murin sleep disorder. The human soldiers who heard about it mostly laughed. Then, they made it a badge. Someone printed the words Voss syndrome on a patch with a small crossed wrench and a broken beam underneath it. The patch spread through 3 different human military units in less than a month. Command sent a memo saying the patches were unauthorized. The memo was largely ignored. Marin did not hear about the patch for almost a year. By then, she was on DUS Station 7, which was a small atmospheric relay post at the ragged end of compact-controlled space, surrounded by nothing much except thin air and a lot of equipment that needed maintaining. She had been reassigned there following her honorable discharge, which was the military's careful way of saying, "You are too complicated to keep and too decorated to punish, so we are making you someone else's problem," which is to say, nobody's problem. She was fine with that. She was good at quiet. She had been good at quiet since Kepler. The quiet did not ask anything from her. She fixed filters. She ran atmospheric calibrations. She ate her meals at a table by a small porthole window, and watched the stars that were the same stars they always were. She did not think about Cassian Drift Station very often. She thought about Thessaly Veko Ruin sometimes. The way the amber in her ridges moved, the careful way she built sentences. "I think you do not fit in a structure." She thought about it, and then she stopped thinking about it. The way she stopped thinking about most things, not by pushing them away, but by setting them down and walking in a different direction. On the other side of the galaxy, Thessaly Vek Oran had gone home. Home was the Keth Intercessory Hall on the 4th continent of Vexora, a building so old it had stopped being a building and started being a landmark. High ceilings, floors of polished stone, walls lined with the recorded observations of every intercessor who had served there in 6,000 years. Thessaly stood before the Grand Intercessory Council and told them what had happened. She was precise. She was thorough. She told them about the station, the beam, the tribunal, the conversation in the White Room. She told them about the way Marin Voss answered questions, in the smallest possible units, removing every word that was not load-bearing, and keeping only what mattered. The council listened. Then they told her what they thought. The first counselor said it was a political act, a human soldier making a gesture designed to create diplomatic goodwill. Thessaly said she did not tell her command about it until after she had already moved the beam. The second counselor said it was an instinct, a biological reflex, something evolutionary in the human makeup that did not translate to intentional behavior. Thessaly said she had 2 broken fingers and a collapsed station and 60 seconds to make the decision. Whatever it was made quickly, and it was made clearly, and it was made without anyone watching. The third counselor said it was Voss syndrome. The compact had a word for it now, a malfunction. Thessaly stood very still for a moment. Her ridges cycled through a color the council had not seen on a sitting intercessor in recorded memory. A deep, slow red, like the last light before a sunset, the color Keth went when they were choosing their words with extreme care, because the ones they were replacing had been unacceptable. "My entire sect was killed in the Veth Corridor Purge," she said. 3 years ago. I was the last of my genetic line. Under kin-bound logic, I was already a ghost. There was no one left whose survival my survival contributed to. By our own framework, I was worth nothing to anyone, including myself. She looked at the counselors one by one. Sergeant Voss did not know any of that, she said. She did not know my caste or my history or my political value. She knew I was under a beam, and she could move it. That was the whole of her logic. And I am asking this council to explain to me why we have named that logic a syndrome. The room was quiet. I am asking you to explain to me, Thessaly said, what we gain by having a framework that would have left me under that beam. Nobody had a good answer. The council did not resolve the question in that session, or the 6 sessions that followed. They debated it for 3 months, and filed it eventually under anomalous phenomena, interspecies human, which was a new category they created specifically because there was nowhere else to put it. Thessaly resigned the day after the 7th session. She went to her apartment, which was small, and looked out over a courtyard where something always seemed to be in flower, and she sat at her desk with a blank document open in front of her. She sat there for a long time. Then she began to write. The book took 2 years to write, and 1 year to argue with publishers about. It was called In Keth, something that translated roughly as The Architecture of the Unreasonable Act. It was not a political document. It was not a military analysis. It was a careful, precise, exhaustively researched examination of one question. What do you call a species that does not run the survival calculation first? It examined human military history, human disaster response, human bystander behavior across 300 documented incidents where humans had endangered themselves to preserve strangers. Not allies, not family, not contracted obligations. Strangers. It was not romantic about it. Thessaly was not a romantic. She noted the failures as carefully as the successes. The times humans had done nothing. The times the calculation had won. She was building a true picture, not a flattering one. But the picture that emerged was undeniable. Humans did not always do the unreasonable thing, but they were the only species in the known galaxy that did it regularly, spontaneously, without framework, without doctrine, without a word for it in advance. They did it, and then they went back to whatever they were doing before. The book landed in Keth academic circles like a stone dropped in still water, rings spreading outward, slowly at first, then faster. It was translated into Veth, then Murin, then Galactic Standard. 3 other species diplomatic corps requested copies. On Dust Station 7, Marin got a message. No sender ID, routed through 2 relay points and a third-party translation service. She opened it. 3 lines. I have been asked to explain you. I have spent 2 years trying. I am not sure my language was large enough. I have been trying to make it larger. I believe I am getting somewhere. Marin read it twice. Then she read it a 3rd time, which was not a thing she usually did. She set her tablet down on the bench next to her atmospheric calibration tools. She looked out the porthole at the same stars. Hell of a thing, she said. To no one, to the empty room, to the stars that were still the same as always. She picked up her wrench. She went back to work. Somewhere across the galaxy, a book was spreading through diplomatic channels, and a new word was beginning to form in 6 different languages, and nobody had told Marin Voss about any of it. She probably would have found that very funny, or she would have made no face about it at all. With Marin, it was sometimes hard to tell. The file arrived on a Thursday. Marin was eating a protein bar when it came through, the kind that tasted like cardboard that had spent time near chocolate and retained only the memory of it. She was sitting in the small operations room of Dust Station 7, half watching a diagnostic scroll across her secondary screen, not thinking about anything much. Her personal comm pinged. No sender listed. Heavy encryption tag. Routed through the Keth intercessory relay network, which meant someone with serious access had sent it, and they had sent it privately, outside of any official channel. She read it. It was longer than the last message, much longer. There is a Keth science vessel called the Velmora. It was conducting atmospheric surveys in the Drath corridor when it was seized 41 hours ago by a splinter faction. Human, former compact military, currently unaffiliated. 17 Keth crew. The faction has stated explicitly that they will execute any non-Keth boarding party. The compact has made 7 requests for negotiated release. All have been declined. Every contracted independent operator in the relevant sector has reviewed the file and declined the contract. Marin chewed, swallowed, kept reading. I am not sending you this because I believe you are the most tactically capable person available, although the record suggests you may be. I am sending you this because I have spent 4 years writing a book about what happens when a human being looks at an impossible situation and does not run the math first. I have been asked by every diplomatic body who has read that book whether it is actually true, whether humans really do this. I would like, and I recognize this is an extraordinary thing to ask, for the answer to still be yes. There is a word in our oldest scripture for what you are. A word from before we had space travel, before we had formal language for half the things we now take for granted. It appears once in 6,000 years of recorded Keth text. The scholars who found it could not agree on whether it was literal or mythological. It is Vel Keth Sor. The closest translation I can give you in your language is, one who refuses to leave the dying behind, even at the cost of everything remaining. We thought it was a thing our ancestors invented to describe a god. I would like to introduce you to 17 people. Marin put the protein bar down. She read the message again. She sat with it for a moment. Just a moment. The way she sat with the stars sometimes. Not thinking about it, just letting it be a thing that was in the room with her. Then she stood up. She had a go bag packed and ready. She had always kept one packed. Old habit. The kind that comes from being the kind of person who the situation always, somehow finds. She pulled on her jacket, checked her sidearm, picked up the go bag. She sent one reply to the message. Send me the approach vectors and the crew manifest. Then she walked to the shuttle bay. The Velmora was a mid-sized survey vessel, designed for long-range atmospheric work, wide body, slow, with more sensor equipment than weapons and crew quarters built for comfort over efficiency. It was currently drifting at the edge of the draft corridor, with its communication array on partial lockdown and 6 armed personnel controlling all 17 decks. Marin had read the whole file on the approach. She knew the layout. She knew the faction, ex-military, well-organized, carrying a specific grievance against the compact that was legitimate in origin and catastrophic in execution. She knew their weapons. She knew which decks they had consolidated the crew on. She knew the 17 Keth scientists, all non-combat, most of them researchers, who spent their time studying gas clouds and atmospheric particulates and had never been in the same room as a gun. She docked at the maintenance port on the vessel's underside, which was not guarded, because nobody with good sense would try to enter through a maintenance port, which was barely wide enough for a human body, and involved a crawl of approximately 40 meters through a conduit that smelled like machine lubricant and recycled air. Marin had been in worse places. She moved through the conduit the way she moved through everything, without wasted motion, without sound, focused entirely on the next 2 meters, and then the 2 after that. She came up through a service panel on deck 4. She stood in the corridor, listened. Voices, 2 decks up. Movement pattern, relaxed. The faction had been here long enough to stop being tense. That was useful information. She moved. The next 45 minutes were not graceful. They were not the kind of thing that looked good in a recording, or read well in a report. They were just the careful, methodical work of a person who had been doing this for 11 years, and who had the kind of calm that comes from having already survived the worst version of this day twice over. One by one, deck by deck. She did not kill anyone. She was precise about that. The faction members went down with the kind of efficiency that left them alive, embarrassed, and due for a very long conversation with compact authorities upon recovery. When she found the Keth crew, they were on deck 8, in the main survey bay, all 17 of them in a group, some sitting, some standing, all with the pale bioluminescent coloring of extreme stress. The color of their species under fear was a gray-white that Marin recognized from a collapsing station on Cassian Drift, what felt like a very long time ago. She stepped through the door. 17 alien scientists looked at her. She looked back. "It's clear," she said. "All 6 of them are secured. Nobody's dead. You can move freely." Nobody moved. One of the scientists, older, with darker ridge coloration than the rest, spoke in careful galactic standard. "You boarded." "Yes. They said they would kill any." "I know what they said." Another silence. "Who sent you?" the older scientist asked. "Friend of mine," Marin said. The compact extraction team arrived 22 minutes later. They found 6 restrained faction members in various states of indignity, 17 very confused Kef scientists, and Marin sitting on the floor of Deck 8, with her back against the wall, eating the second half of a protein bar she had started before departure and hadn't had time to finish. She looked up when the extraction team came in. "All yours," she said. She handed over her written summary, declined medical attention, declined debriefing, and was on a shuttle back to Dust Station 7, inside of an hour. Thessaly arrived on the last shuttle in. She walked across the docking bay, past the compact officers, and the extraction medics, and the 17 Kef scientists who were still trying to understand what they had just witnessed. And she found Marin sitting on a crate near the wall, with her bag at her feet. She sat down next to her. Her ridges were bone white, the same color as a woman trying very hard not to show what she is feeling. They sat in silence for a moment. "Is it over?" Thessaly asked. "Yeah. Are you going to be all right?" Marin looked at the middle distance. At the wall of the docking bay, that was just a wall, doing only what walls do. "I'm always all right," she said. Thessaly had read enough by now to know what that meant. She had written 200 pages about what that meant, about the people who carry weight in the place where decisions live, and call it fine, and go back to work. She reached into the bag she carried and took out a small, flat object. A book, printed on Keth pressed fiber, the kind that lasted for decades. She set it in Marin's hands. Marin looked at it. The cover was in Keth's script. She could not read a word of it. "It's been translated," Thessaly said, "into 43 languages. Galactic Standard is in the back." Marin turned it over, looked at the spine, looked at the cover again. "Is this about me?" "It is about the idea of you," Thessaly said, "which is somewhat larger." Marin was quiet for a moment. "The word," she said, "the one you mentioned, Vel Ketsor. Yes. What do your people actually think it means? Not the translation. What does it feel like in your language?" Thessaly thought about it for a long time, which was not something she usually needed. "It feels like a door," she finally said, "that opens from the inside." Marin looked down at the book. Something moved across her face, something that arrived and stayed for 3 full seconds, and then went back to wherever it lived, below the jaw, below the part she let anyone see. She offered Thessaly the last piece of the protein bar. Thessaly took it. Across the galaxy the word Vel Kethsor was passing between diplomatic channels in 17 languages. 3 species had begun revising their first contact protocols for human engagement. The Compact's behavioral index still listed Voss syndrome as an anomaly, and soldiers were still wearing the patch. And someone had started selling a cheap ceramic mug with a broken beam printed on the side that was somehow a bestseller on 4 different space stations, none of which Marin knew. She sat on her crate with a book she couldn't read, and the quiet kind of tired that isn't the bad kind. Outside the porthole, the stars were the same stars they always were. She would go back to Dust Station 7 in the morning. She would fix the filters. She would run the calibrations. And the situation would find her again when it was ready. It always did. She was very specifically the kind of person that it always did.